If you're a beginner at programming, you're probably coding some simple terminal or console applications, but after you've done a few of those, the next level that I think beginners should take is to start building some projects that involve CSV files, or in other words, CSV file projects. If you're not already aware, CSV stands for comma-separated values. So all of the values in this file are separated by commas. And so you can see that this is just data in a CSV file. And it has some rows, some columns. So the columns here are the names. The first column is name, second column is age. And then the third column is country. And then each row is an entry. And then you have the first row up here that is just going to be the headers for those columns. And so CSV files are really fun to play with because if you're a beginner at programming and then you have this kind of data in this format, you can read through this file in your program and then you can categorize or organize this data, and then you can come up with some cool applications. When I was in university, one of the first projects that we had was to open a CSV file and then to read some of the data. And I think it's a good project for beginners because you first practice with file input output. And so that all that means is just to have a file as your input, and then you output whatever. After you process the data, then you can output some sort of result. And then maybe you can output that result into another file. So you get that kind of practice. Another cool thing about CSV file projects is that once you've implemented one feature in your project or in your program, you can actually expand on that program to do a lot more cool things. So say you had a program that was initially just averaging all of the ages here, you can actually expand on that program, because if you have all of these people's data, maybe what you can do next is you can add a feature to sort this file by age. So you can put the youngest people at the top of the file and then all of the older people at the bottom of the file. Or maybe you can have the user give a continent, and then based on that continent, the program will spit out all the people who live on that continent. Or maybe once you have that, you can actually expand it to have the program produce different output files, and then these output files will give all the people who live in a certain continent. So maybe there's a North America file or a South America file, and in those files, you will have the people who live on those continents. And so you can really expand these CSV file projects, and that's what I really like about it. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about CSV file projects, give you some ideas on programs that you could write, and then also give you some examples of features that you could implement in those programs. So my name's Henrik, and I'm here to help you learn the foundations of software development. So let's get started. Okay, let's look at this example here, people.csv. This is a classic example for CSV files for beginners, and that's because there's a lot of different things you can do with this CSV file. It doesn't have a particular name for this kind of program, but you can write a program that can do a lot of different things, can focus on a lot of different aspects. So for example, you can focus on the age aspect, and so you can categorize people by their ages, maybe make a table for all the people who live in a certain age bracket, or maybe you can categorize according to the country. And so you can organize people according to where they live geographically. And maybe you can also do something like if you query for someone's name, just give all of the information about that person. And so there's a lot of different things that you can practice on with this file. You can practice your skills in C. Maybe you're coding in C. You can play with this kind of file to try different kinds of ideas, and it's just fun to play with. Okay, let's move on to another CSV file. So this CSV file has different students and then all of the grades for their midterm, second midterm, and their final exam. And this one is kind of more practical because you can use this at, say you're a teacher or a professor, then you can have everyone's names here, and then you can calculate their final grade based on their exams. And so this one is more practical, more focused in terms of features. It has an actual goal. So that kind of program has an actual goal. And this is why I like this example, because you can write a program that has a particular focus, and it's really easy to determine what the focus is. And then you have all of this data. Maybe you can even calculate what is the average of the first midterm, average of the second midterm, and then average of the final. And then you can see if there's a way you can curve people's grades accordingly. And so you can see what is the standard deviation for the first midterm, second midterm, final, and then you can add all of this kind of logic in your program, and then you can calculate their final grade based on the distribution of these grades. So that's another example that you can use for, this is another CSV file that you can play with, or maybe you can actually use in your real life. Okay, here's another CSV file project idea that uses an expenses.csv file. And I like this one because this is very practical. The grades.csv is practical, but I think it's only practical if you're a teacher. But the expenses.csv is something that you can do as long as you have a credit card, because most credit card companies, I think most, if not all, credit card companies can give you a expenses.csv file, and then you can download it from your website, from their website, and then you can get all of your expenses for that month or for that whole year, and then you can categorize all of these transactions and get the history of your transactions, and you can create a budget application or a personalized finance app, and you can actually categorize you can look at all of these categories here and then see how much you're spending in groceries, see how much you're spending in utilities, transportation, and then maybe you can even set some budget allocation. And I actually talk about this in one of my free guides. It's called my Personalized Finance App Programming Guide. You can download that in the link in the description. And basically is what I do in that guide is I just teach you how to go through an expenses.csv file and actually categorize it and turn it into a personalized finance app. So if you're interested in that, download that in the link in the description. I really like this program because it gives you an incentive to code it. So if you are learning how to program, one of the problems or one of the struggles of new programmers is that they don't have a consistent routine, or they lack motivation at times. But I think if you have a project, if you're working on a project that you can actually use in your everyday life, then you have some extra motivation, extra incentive, extra emotional investment to actually keep coding. And so I usually recommend this for my students to go through their own expenses.csv file and then create their own personalized finance app. And then they can cancel their subscriptions to all those personal budget apps that are out there in the market. All right, so those are examples of CSV file projects that you can do. Now I want to talk about some features that you can implement in those projects. So I'm just going to do one for grades.csv. And so I'm going to use this as an example. And I'm going to show you some features you can expand on for this grades.csv project. All right, I'm going to create a new C program. We're going to call it CSV template.c. And I'm going to call it that because I'm going to give you a link where you can actually download this code base and you can play with it and use it as a template for your own CSV projects. So I'm going to call it CSV template.c, and what we're going to do is we're going to take grades.csv, and then the first thing that we need to do, and I always recommend for beginners to do, is just go ahead and print all of the data that you get in that file and make sure that your program is able to see all of that data. And this is something that I did in my first project, or one of my first projects in university, is just to print all of the data that we see in the CSV file, and that can ensure that we're actually getting all of the data. Okay, so here's our C program that's going to open the CSV file, and then we're going to get each line and then print each line, and then we're going to close the file afterwards. And if you want a deeper dive into how this all works, you can watch my other tutorial on how to read a CSV file in C. And so you can watch that video if you want to have a deeper understanding on this. But I'm just showing you some features that you can do in these CSV file projects, so we're going to go really fast. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. Okay, so it's going to read name, midterm, final, and then Alice, all the way up to Julia here. And let's just check if we actually, that's all of the data here. Okay, so it goes all the way up to Julia. So we're actually reading all of the data from this CSV file, even the the row here that has the descriptions of the columns. Maybe what we can do next is try to get the corresponding row for a certain person. So we can have the user input someone's name, and then after that we'll spit out the grades of that person. So let's go ahead and code that. Okay, we've updated the C program. So we open the file here, and if it doesn't work, we have this message here to tell the user that it didn't work. And this might happen if the grades.csv file is not located in the same directory. So make sure your grades.csv file is in the same directory. And then we have some variables here, some arrays here. And so this is for the name. This one is for the line in that CSV file. And then, so we ask the user to enter the name, and then they can enter a name here, and the name can only be up to 50 characters, or actually 49 characters, excluding the end of line character. So we're just going to make sure that the name is less than 49 characters. And then we're going to read the headers. So this is for the first line. So we're going to just get the first line up here. So name, midterm to final, and then we're just going to print the header of those columns. And then we're just going to read each line and check if the first column matches the search name that we asked the user to input. And so you can see that here we're going to use strtalk just to tokenize the line and get the name field. So we're getting the name field here. And again, if this is confusing to you, you can watch that tutorial on how to read a CSV file in C. So make sure you read that. Then we have the token, and then we're going to make sure it's not null, and we want to compare it with the search name that the user inputted. And then if that's all good, then if this comparison is good. If it matches, it's going to equal 0, and if it's not null, and then that means we found it. And so we're going to print the original line here, and then we're going to say, oh, we found one, and then we're going to break out of this while loop. And so we stop going through the CSV file, we break out of it, and if found is 0, that means we didn't find any record or that corresponds to that name that the user inputted. Then we say no record found, and then we close the file at the end. So let's run that. Okay, enter the name to search for. So let's put in Fiona. Okay, Fiona is 768480, and then let's check, is that correct? Did Fiona really get those grades, 768480? Yes, that's correct. Another thing we can do is maybe we can average the grades of Fiona and then give her final grade. So basically we can change this to say enter the name that you want to, or enter the student that you want to calculate. And then we can average their grades for their exams and then give the final grade. All right, so we've updated the program. Now we're going to open the grades.csv file here. And then we're going to ask the user to enter the student's name. They're going to enter the student's name. We're going to skip the header. And then, because we as the programmer, we know how the CSV file is formatted, so we don't really care about the header right now. So we're going to read the rest of the lines here, and while there's still lines here, we're going to go through it. And then we're going to do strtalk, and we're going to get the name. And then if the name is matching the search name, then we're going to go ahead and do strtalk to get the midterms. So the midterm and the final. So we get the first midterm, the second midterm, and then the final, and we use strtalk to get those. And then we, if those are actually valid, or if we actually do get some character or a string, if we do get a string, then we're going to convert those strings into numbers, into floats. So we get to convert them into these float numbers. Then we add them together, divide by 3, get the average, and then we go ahead and print the results. So we get the name that the user inputted, and then we display their midterm scores, the final scores, and then the average, and then the grade. And then for the grade, there's a function here called calculate letter grade. And so we're going to put the average. So after we get the average, we're going to put it in here. And what this calculate letter grade does is it's another function that will return A, B, C, or D according to the average that's inputted into this function. So if it's greater than 90, we're going to return A, and then so A is going to be returned. And then if you come down here, A is going to display here. And likewise with the other grades for B, C, and D, according to the average, the grade that corresponds to the average will be shown here. Then we're going to say found equals 1, and then so found is actually a flag that says if we found it, we're going to toggle 1. If we didn't find it, it's going to be 0. So if it's 0, but we do the inverse of 0, or not 0, then we go ahead and print no record found. So let's go ahead and run this one. Okay, let's do Fiona again. Okay, so Fiona's scores is 76, 84, 80, and then the average of all of those scores is a B. And then let's check, is that true? Yeah, 76, 84, 80. Other possible things that we could do with this CSV file is we can also convert all of these rows here into structs, and so we can store this data as structs in our program. If you notice in our program, we don't actually look through all of the data. We just wait until we find the name that we care about, and then we do our calculations here. But we don't actually convert the data into structs, but having them converted to structs is good practice with structs, and then you can actually do some more applications. Maybe you can calculate the average of the midterms after that, after you have all of the data in structs, or maybe the second midterm, the average of that, and then you can create some sort of curve for your grades after you have all of their data into structs. And so that's another thing you can do with this program. Okay, so here's the CSV template project. So you can go ahead and clone this repository, or maybe just copy this .c file for your own template for your own CSV file projects. Just make sure you don't commit any of your changes to my main branch, and we'll be good. All right, there you go. So I showed you some CSV file projects that you can do. And like I said, CSV file projects are really cool. They give you unlimited amount of programs that you can write, a lot of practical programs you can write, like my first app, my personalized finance app that you can code. Like I mentioned earlier, you can take your credit card transactions from your credit card company, put them in a transactions.csv file, and then you can make your own personalized finance app. And if you want extra guidance on that, be sure to click the link in the description, and you can do all these kinds of cool things with all of these CSV files. Alright, that's it for this week's video. I hope it really helped you out and gave you some ideas for some CSV file projects that you can do. And if you did like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any other ideas, or if you have a new idea on a CSV file project that you can do, I'd love to hear from you too. Leave a comment down below and share with me what kind of project you're going to build next. I'd love to hear from you about that. And if you have any other questions, again, feel free to let me know in the comment section, and I'll be sure to answer you there. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.